Here are 3 reasons that postural restoration might not be working for you. So reason number 1 is simple: improper performance of techniques. So sometimes the reality is that you just don't know how to do the techniques properly, or you've tried other interventions and they've kind of told you, oh, this is how you have to do things, and that's not necessarily the way things work at postural restoration. For example, something that's very commonly prescribed as a beginner exercise, which I think is really, really difficult for a lot of people to do properly, is a 90-90 hip lift. A lot of the time we tend to kind of try and do a glute bridge almost on the wall. That's not what you want. Or we feel our hamstring close to our knee. That's not necessarily what we want either. We want proximal, I believe proximal at least, hamstring. So hamstrings close to the butt. Again, in my opinion at least, the point of that exercise is pulling that pelvis, that left hemipelvis, back into a more neutral position, and also learning to have heel strike when we walk. And in postural restoration, a big difference with what we do here and what other therapies do is that everything revolves around walking and breathing. It's not necessarily about strengthening muscles. What we want is to get left AFIR on our left pelvis, which is basically just my way of saying reciprocal pelvis dynamics as we walk. I'll discuss that more in depth in the future. And established left ZOA, which is basically just me saying getting our diaphragm to breathe properly or move properly and allow for optimal ribcage dynamics to take place. Again, future video, I'll discuss that more in depth. That's just kind of what you need to know for now. And that's a very big difference. So if you're someone that does resistance training and thinks, oh, I should be feeling my hamstring the same as I would feel my hamstring when I do leg curls, for example, or an RDL, a hinge movement, or an isolated leg flexion movement, that's not necessarily what we want. So let's talk about reason number 2. Reason number 2 is this: pathology. So when I talk about pathology in the context of postural restoration, I mean that you have ligamentive laxity. And generally what we find is that we usually have either right iliolumbar laxity or we have left iliofemoral / pubofemoral laxity. So we find this out by performing certain tests, and when we have certain tests that tell us certain information, which is the whole point of a test in PRI, or assessment, might be a nicer way to put it, we find, okay, so your pelvis is stuck like this, but you have range of motion that you shouldn't have when we perform this other assessment / test, and that's an indication of pathology. Now, 98% of people have this, so it's not generally a huge issue. It just means that you need techniques more tailored to your specific needs, and that it's going to take a while for you to adapt. I'd say even for people without pathology, even though they get better really, really quick, I would say you probably want 3 months bare minimum, because again, PRI is about the brain. It's about this guy and not necessarily this guy. And just to give you a visual, you have to imagine when you're stuck in that left AIC, right BC pattern, so the pelvis is going like this, rib cage is going the other way. Imagine all the muscle outside this diaphragm and tendons, ligaments, all the stuff around here that's shifting positionally because you're stuck like this all the time. So you can imagine that ligaments would get very stretched out, and suddenly now you're moving in ways that you shouldn't necessarily move because of what we've tested. Not so good. Again, not the end of the world. It just means that we have to take different steps to solve your chronic pain. Okay, and the final reason, in my opinion, is that you need an optometrist and orthodontist. So in postural restoration, I like to say that this is a therapy about the feet, the eyes, and the jaw. So I say that because the feet are the hands of the lower body, and really probably the most important sensory organ in the entire body, because there's tons of nerve receptors down there, and your feet are sensing what's underneath the earth below you. You have to understand that your brain is blind and it doesn't necessarily know what's going on. And the same applies literally to eyesight, where if you have a poor glasses prescription, or even wear glasses even though you're supposed to, you're going to have issues because your brain is like, I can't see, I can't interpret all the information around me, we're just going to lock up, you're not allowed to move. I could explain this further, but I think for people that have dealt with this before, it's pretty obvious what I'm talking about. It's as simple as, okay, I don't feel safe up here, So I'm not going to let you do whatever you want to do. And that's part of why sometimes you need to go to an optometrist and figure out how to get a correct prescription for sight. And jaw, especially orthodontics, is more just about teeth being misaligned or overbite one way or the other, or they just don't line up properly. Sometimes they can literally throw your whole body off balance, where suddenly now you're dealing with being stuck in a right TMCC pattern. Again, future video I'll explain what that's kind of talking about. But basically it just means that sometimes this stuff up here, face, cranium, needs to be dealt with before we deal with other stuff, because without this functioning properly, none of the techniques are going to work. And those are my 3 reasons that postural restoration might not work for you.